The dust from the failing cattle herd rose like a funeral shroud over the land that Reese Weston had sworn to protect. And as he watched another cow collapse near the dried creek bed, he knew that even his father's memory could not save this ranch now. It was late summer in 1878, and the Montana Territory had turned cruel. The ranch sat just outside the small town of Wyatt, a settlement that had sprung up during the gold rush years and now survived on cattle ranching and hope. But hope was a commodity Reese had run out of months ago, right around the time the drought had started killing his herd and the bank had sent its third notice. The Weston Ranch had been in his family for 20 years, carved out of wilderness by his father's hands and determination. Reese had been only 8 years old when they first arrived, watching his father build the main house board by board. Now, at 27, he stood to lose everything because nature had decided to withhold its rain, and the cattle market had collapsed. He had 17 head left from what had once been nearly 200. The hay fields were brown and brittle. The creek that had never run dry in 2 decades was now just cracked mud and stones. Reese removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead, his dark hair plastered to his scalp from the relentless sun. He was a tall man, lean from hard work and lately from skipping meals to make the supplies stretch further. His hired hands had left 2 months ago when he could no longer pay them. Now it was just him, his aging horse Scout, and a ranch that was dying by degrees. He walked back to the house as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if he had any capacity left for beauty. The house itself was modest but well built, 2 stories with a wide porch where his mother used to sit and shell peas. Both his parents were gone now, his mother from fever 5 years back and his father from a heart that gave out 2 winters ago. Reese had promised his father on his deathbed that he would keep the ranch going, would honor the Weston name and the land they had claimed. He was failing that promise with every day that passed. Inside, the house was too quiet. He lit a lamp against the growing darkness and stared at the ledger on the kitchen table. The numbers had not improved since the last time he had looked at them. He owed the bank in Wyatt $300 by the end of September, just 6 weeks away. He had maybe $40 worth of cattle left, if he could even get them to market alive. The thought of selling the land made his stomach turn, but men in Wyatt were already circling, waiting for him to fail so they could snap up the property for a fraction of its worth. He made himself eat some beans and stale bread, then sat on the porch as night fell completely. The stars came out in their thousands, indifferent to his troubles. He thought about his father, about the pride in the old man's eyes when they had their best year, when the herd had numbered over 200, and the future had seemed secure. He thought about his mother's garden, now just weeds and dust. He thought about giving up, about walking away and finding work somewhere else, starting over. But the shame of that idea was worse than the hunger in his belly. The next morning arrived with the same merciless sun. Reese rose before dawn and did his chores, which did not take long anymore. He gave Scout the last of the oats and made a mental note that he would need to ride into Wyatt soon for supplies he could not afford. The 17 remaining cattle were huddled near where the creek used to run, as if their presence might will the water back into existence. He was fixing a section of fence that had come loose when he heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Visitors were rare these days. Most people in Wyatt had stopped coming by, uncomfortable with witnessing his slow failure. He shaded his eyes and watched as a covered wagon came up the road, pulled by 2 horses that looked like they had seen better days themselves. The wagon stopped near the house and Reese walked over, curious despite himself. The driver was a woman, which surprised him. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with auburn hair pinned up under a simple bonnet and a face that showed both exhaustion and determination. Her dress was plain but clean brown calico that had been mended in several places. She held the reins with capable hands and regarded him with green eyes that were direct and unafraid. "Is this the Weston Ranch?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight accent he could not quite place. "Eastern, maybe. Certainly not from around here." "It is," Reese said, aware of how he must look, dusty and unshaven and probably half wild. "I am Reese Weston." "Katherine Kimball," she said, not offering her hand but nodding in a way that suggested she understood formality even if circumstances had stripped it away. "I saw a notice in town that you might be looking for help." Reese frowned. "I did not post any notice." Katherine tilted her head slightly. "The man at the general store, Mr. Patterson, he mentioned you might need someone. I am looking for work. I can cook, clean, mend, help with animals. I am a hard worker." "I cannot pay you," Reese said bluntly. There was no point in pretending otherwise. "I can barely feed myself." "I am not asking for money," Katherine said. "Just a place to stay and food. I will work for room and board." Reese studied her more carefully. There was a story here he could tell. Women did not travel alone through Montana territory in covered wagons for no reason. "Where are you from?" "Pennsylvania originally. Most recently from Billings." Her voice was steady, but he could see tension in her shoulders. "I need a place to stay, Mr. Weston. I am willing to work hard for it. That is all you need to know." He should say no. One more mouth to feed, even a small one, was a burden he could not afford. But there was something in her eyes, a kind of desperation that he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. And if he was being honest, the loneliness had become its own kind of torture. "There is a room upstairs that was my mother's sewing room," he heard himself say. "It has a bed. You can have that. But I meant what I said about food. We are down to basics here. Beans and whatever I can hunt, coffee when we have it, nothing fancy." "That is more than I have now," Katherine said simply. "Thank you." She climbed down from the wagon with a carpet bag and a small trunk. Reese helped her carry them inside, and as he showed her up the narrow stairs to the second floor, he was acutely aware of how shabby the house must look to her. Dust covered most surfaces. Dishes sat unwashed in the kitchen. The floor needed sweeping. He had let everything go because what was the point of tidying a house you were about to lose? The sewing room was small but had a window that looked out over what used to be his mother's garden. The bed was narrow but had a decent mattress. Katherine set down her bag and looked around, and to Reese's surprise, she smiled slightly. "This is fine," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Weston." "Reese," he said. "If you are going to be staying here, we might as well use first names." "Katherine," she said. "Or Kate. Most people call me Kate." He left her to settle in and went back outside, feeling strange about the whole situation. But when he came in for midday, the kitchen was transformed. The dishes were washed and put away. The floor had been swept. There was fresh bread cooling on the counter, made from flour he had forgotten he even had. Kate stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled better than anything he had smelled in months. "I found some dried beans and a bit of salt pork," she said without turning around. "And there were some wild onions growing out back. It is not much, but it will be filling." Reese felt something crack in his chest, some hard shell he had built up. "You did not have to do all this." "I said I would work for my keep," Kate replied. She turned to look at him, and her expression was serious. "I keep my word." They ate together at the kitchen table, and it was the first real meal Reese had eaten in weeks. The bread was perfect, the beans actually flavorful. He ate 2 bowls and 3 slices of bread, and Kate ate her own portion without comment, though he noticed she took less than he did. "So," he said finally, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, "what brought you all the way from Pennsylvania to Montana Territory?" Kate was quiet for a moment, her hands wrapped around a cup of water. "I was married," she said finally. "My husband died 6 months ago in a mining accident near Billings. We had only been married a year. After he died, I had no money and no family. I tried to find work in Billings, but jobs for women are scarce. A man there offered me work, but the kind that would have required me to compromise things I am not willing to compromise." Reese understood immediately. The West was full of men who saw women alone as opportunities to exploit. "So you left?" "I left," Kate confirmed. "I have been traveling from town to town, looking for honest work. When I arrived in Wyatt yesterday, Mr. Patterson at the general store was kind to me. He mentioned that you were struggling, that you might need help even if you could not pay. I thought perhaps we could help each other." "I am grateful," Reese said honestly, "but I should be clear with you, this ranch is failing. I owe the bank money I do not have. In 6 weeks they will probably foreclose. You might end up with no place to stay after all." Kate met his eyes steadily. 6 weeks from now is 6 weeks from now. Today is today. I would rather be here working than anywhere else." Something about her calm acceptance steadied him. "All right then. Tomorrow I will show you around the property, what is left of it. Maybe you can help me figure out how to keep those last 17 cattle alive until I can get them to market." That night, Reese lay in his bed and listened to the sounds of another person in the house. Kate moving quietly in the room above him, the creak of floorboards, the soft sound of a window opening. It should have felt intrusive, but instead it felt like the house was breathing again, coming back to life. The next morning, Kate was up before him, which was saying something since Reese had been rising before dawn his whole life. She had coffee made from the last of their stores and more of that good bread. After breakfast, he took her out to see the property. The ranch covered 500 acres, though much of it was now useless without water. He showed her the cattle, thin and listless in the heat. He showed her the dried creek, the withered hay fields, the empty barn that used to house horses and equipment he had sold off one piece at a time. He explained about the drought, about the market collapse, about the debt and the deadline. He laid it all out because she deserved to know what she had walked into. Kate listened without interrupting, her eyes taking in everything. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, standing in the middle of what used to be his mother's garden and looking out at the brown landscape. "It is not hopeless," she said finally. Reese gave a bitter laugh. "Feels pretty hopeless to me." "No," Kate said firmly. She turned to face him and there was fire in her green eyes. "It is not hopeless. It is difficult, yes, but not hopeless. Those cattle are thin but alive. That means they can be fattened. The creek is dry, but the well near the house still works, correct?" "Yes," Reese admitted. "The well has not gone dry. Then we haul water to the cattle. Every day as much as they need. We keep them alive and healthy. And this garden," she gestured around at the weeds, "this can be cleared and replanted. There is still time before the first frost to get turnips, late carrots, greens. Food for us and fodder for the animals. Kate, I appreciate the optimism, but hauling water for 17 cattle is backbreaking work, and replanting a garden takes seeds we do not have and time we cannot spare." "So we make time," Kate said stubbornly, "and I can get seeds. Mr. Patterson was kind to me yesterday. I can ask him if he would extend credit against future harvest. Some men are willing to take a chance on people." Reese wanted to believe her, but hope was dangerous. Hope made the fall hurt worse. "And what about the $300 I owe the bank?" "One problem at a time," Kate said. "First, we keep the cattle alive. We make this place functional again. Then we figure out the rest. But giving up now helps no one. He looked at her standing there in her mended dress, her chin raised in determination, and something stirred in him that he thought had died. Not hope, not exactly, but maybe the possibility of hope. "All right," he said. "We try your way. But when it fails, I am going to remind you that I warned you. When it succeeds," Kate corrected, "you are going to admit that I was right." They started that very day. Reese rigged up a water hauling system using barrels and Scout, and they began the arduous process of bringing water from the well to the cattle. It was brutally hard work under the merciless sun. Kate insisted on taking her share of the labor, and though Reese tried to spare her the worst of it, she refused to be coddled. They hauled water for hours, until his shoulders screamed and his hands were raw from rope burn. Kate worked with grim determination, her face flushed with heat but her pace never slowing. The cattle drank gratefully, and Reese had to admit they looked more alert almost immediately. When evening came, they were both exhausted. Kate made dinner, a simple stew made from one of the scrawny chickens that still scratched around the property and more of those wild onions. They ate in comfortable silence, too tired for conversation. Over the next days, they fell into a rhythm. Up before dawn, coffee and breakfast, then out to haul water and tend the cattle. Kate also began the massive job of clearing the garden, pulling weeds and turning soil that was hard as rock. Reese watched her work and found himself impressed despite himself. She never complained, never asked for breaks beyond what was necessary. Her hands blistered and bled, and she wrapped them in cloth and kept working. On the fourth day, she hitched up her wagon and drove into Wyatt. Reese worried about her going alone, but she insisted. She came back late afternoon with a small sack of seeds and a triumphant expression. "Mr. Patterson remembered my husband," she told him as she showed him the seeds. Turnips, carrots, lettuce, herbs. He knew Sam had been a good man. He said he would stake me the seeds against a share of the harvest. He also mentioned that the hotel in town is looking for someone to do their washing. He thought I might be interested. "Kate, you are already working yourself to death here," Reese protested. "The hotel will pay real money," Kate said practically. $1 for every week's washing. If I do that once a week, that is $4 more a month toward what you owe. Every little bit helps." "We owe," Reese found himself saying. "If you are working this hard, it is not just my debt anymore." Something passed between them then, a recognition of partnership. Kate smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face and made her beautiful. "All right, what we owe." The garden went in over the next week, with Kate working in the early mornings before the sun got too high and in the evenings when it began to cool. Reese helped when he could, but he was focused on the cattle. He had started supplementing their sparse grazing with hay he begged from a neighbor who took pity on him, promising to pay it back somehow. The cattle slowly began to put on weight, not much but enough to notice. Kate started doing the hotel's washing, which meant an entire day each week bent over tubs of hot water. Reese hated that she had to do it, hated seeing her exhausted face when she returned. But the coins she brought back went into a jar on the kitchen shelf, a small but growing pile of hope. They talked in the evenings, sitting on the porch as the heat finally broke. Kate told him about Pennsylvania, about growing up on a small farm with 3 brothers. She told him about meeting Sam, her late husband, at a church social. Sam had been a dreamer who believed he would strike it rich in the Montana gold fields. They had married quickly, too quickly maybe, and come west full of hope. The hope had died with Sam when the mine shaft collapsed. "I was angry at him for a long time," Kate admitted one night, her voice soft in the darkness. "Angry that he brought me out here and then left me alone. But anger does not help. It does not change anything. So I decided to keep moving forward to find a way to survive." And then I found this place, and you." Reese told her about his parents, about building the ranch, about watching his father pour everything he had into this land. He told her about the good years and the pride he had felt, and then about the drought and the slow failure and the shame that ate at him daily. "It is not shame," Kate said firmly. "You cannot control the weather, Reese. You cannot make it rain. What you can control is how you respond. And you responded by keeping fighting, by taking a chance on me, by working yourself half to death to save those cattle. There is no shame in any of that." He wanted to believe her. Sitting there in the dark with her voice steady beside him, it was easier to believe that maybe she was right. 4 weeks after Kate had arrived, something shifted. The cattle were noticeably healthier, their ribs no longer quite so visible. The garden had sprouted, tiny green shoots pushing up through the soil in defiant rows. The money jar had $17 in it. It was nowhere near enough, but it was something. And Reese was noticing other things too. The way Kate's hair caught the morning light, strands of auburn and gold escaping from her bun. The way she hummed while she cooked, old hymns he half remembered from his mother's singing. The way she laughed, rare but genuine, when one of the chickens did something particularly stupid. The way his heart had started to lift when he saw her each morning, the way the house felt like a home again instead of a prison. He tried to ignore these feelings. Kate was here out of necessity, working for room and board. She had been widowed only 6 months ago. The last thing she needed was him developing feelings for her. Besides, in 2 weeks the bank would come calling, and none of these small victories would matter if he could not come up with the money he owed. But the feelings would not be ignored. They grew stronger each day, fed by her smile, her determination, her presence. He found himself watching her more than he should, noticing things he had no business noticing. The curve of her neck when she pinned up her hair, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the sound of her footsteps above him at night, the knowledge that she was just 1 floor away. Kate must have noticed something, because one evening she asked him directly, "Is everything all right, Reese? You have been quiet lately." They were sitting on the porch after another long day, the sky blazing with sunset. Reese considered lying, then decided she deserved honesty. "I have been thinking," he said carefully, "about what happens in 2 weeks when the bank comes. Even with the washing money, and if we sell every cattle we have, we are going to be short, probably by half at least. I have been thinking I might be able to get work in Wyatt, earn the rest, ask the bank for an extension." "That is sensible," Kate said. "We will figure it out together." "But that is not all I have been thinking about," Reese continued. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to keep talking. "I have been thinking about you, about how different this place feels since you arrived, about how I look forward to seeing you each morning and how empty the house felt before you came. And I know I have no right to these thoughts, not with everything else going on, not when you are only here because you had nowhere else to go. But I cannot seem to stop thinking them." Kate was quiet for a long moment. The sunset painted her face in gold and red, and Reese braced himself for her to tell him he was being inappropriate, that she was still mourning her husband, that he had misread everything. Instead, she said quietly, "I have been thinking about you too." Reese felt his breath catch. "You have?" "I did not expect to," Kate said. "When I came here, I was just looking for survival, a place to sleep, food to eat, work to do that would keep my mind off everything I had lost. But you gave me more than that. You gave me purpose. You treated me with respect when I had grown used to men seeing me as something to use. You worked beside me, listened to me, trusted me. And somewhere in all that, I started to care about you, about this ranch, about our future here." "Our future," Reese repeated, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Kate turned to face him fully, and in the dying light her eyes were bright. "I know it has only been a month. I know I am probably being foolish. But yes, our future, if you want that too." Reese reached for her hand, his rough, calloused fingers closing gently around hers. "I want that more than anything. But Kate, we might not have a future here. 2 weeks from now, this might not be my ranch anymore. Then we will figure something else out," Kate said. "The ranch is not what matters, Reese. You matter. We matter." He leaned forward, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her softly. Her lips were warm and dry from the sun, and she tasted like the coffee they had shared after dinner. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, and Reese felt something settle into place in his heart. Some piece he had not known was missing. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathless. Kate laughed, a sound of pure joy that made Reese want to kiss her again. "So we are doing this," she said. "Really doing this. If you will have me," Reese said. "A broke cowboy with a failing ranch and nothing to offer but hard work and uncertainty." "That sounds exactly right," Kate said, and kissed him again. The next 2 weeks took on a different character. They still worked dawn to dusk, still hauled water and tended cattle and worked the garden. Kate still went to town for the hotel's washing. But now there were stolen moments between the work. Kisses in the barn where no one could see. Holding hands as they walked out to check the cattle in the evening. Whispered conversations that stretched late into the night, sharing dreams and fears and plans. Reese found himself energized in a way he had not been in months. Yes, the deadline was approaching, and yes, they were still short on money, but with Kate beside him it felt manageable. They made plans. They would sell the cattle, every one of them, to raise as much as possible. Reese would try to get work in Wyatt to earn the rest. They would ask the bank for an extension, just a few months, to allow them to harvest the garden and sell the produce. Something would work out. It had to. 3 days before the bank's deadline, they drove the cattle into Wyatt for the market. 17 head, thin but healthy enough after their weeks of care. The market was crowded with ranchers, all trying to sell in the same depressed market. Reese's heart sank as he heard the prices being offered, even less than he had feared. He sold the cattle for $52 total. Less than $3 a head. It was insulting, but he had no choice. He took the money and added it to their savings, and they had $89. Nowhere near the $300 he needed. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Kate sat beside him on the wagon seat, her hand resting on his arm. When they got home, she squeezed his hand and said, "We will figure this out. I promise." But Reese was not sure how. He spent the evening running numbers in his head, trying to find some combination that would add up to $300. It did not exist. Even if he sold the wagon, Scout, every chicken, every piece of furniture in the house, he would not reach $300. The next morning, Kate woke him before dawn. She was already dressed, her expression determined. "Get dressed and come with me." Confused, Reese followed her outside. She led him to her wagon and pulled back the canvas cover, revealing a wooden chest he had not noticed before. "This was my mother's," Kate said quietly. "She left it to me when she died. I have been carrying it with me because I could not bear to sell it, but now I think it is time." She opened the chest, and Reese's eyes widened. Inside was a full set of china, delicate and beautiful. Serving plates, dinner plates, bowls, teacups. Not just china, but silver cutlery as well, polished and carefully wrapped. There was a silver tea service, intricate and clearly valuable. There were linens, embroidered by hand, the kind of quality that spoke of money and status in a way his rough ranch house never had. "Kate, no," Reese said immediately. "These are your mother's things. I cannot let you sell them." "They are just things, Reese," Kate said firmly. "My mother is gone." The china and silver do not bring her back, but they can save this ranch. They can save our future. That is what she would have wanted, for them to be used for something important. But this is all you have left of her." "No," Kate said, and her voice was gentle but certain. "I have her love. I have her memory. I have the lessons she taught me about strength and endurance. Those are what matter, not plates and teacups. This is my choice, Reese. Let me make it." He wanted to argue, but he could see in her eyes that she had made up her mind. And more than that, he could see the love there, the willingness to sacrifice something precious for their future together. "All right," he said quietly. "We will sell them together." They loaded the chest carefully into the wagon and drove to Wyatt. Mr. Patterson, ever helpful, directed them to a merchant who dealt in fine goods. The merchant was a fastidious man named Mr. Carlyle, who handled the china and silver with appreciative care, examining each piece carefully. "This is exceptional quality," he said finally. "European, I believe. Worth quite a bit even here on the frontier. I can offer you $220 for the full set." Reese felt his heart leap. Combined with their savings, that would be more than enough. He looked at Kate, giving her one last chance to change her mind. She nodded firmly. "We will take it," Reese said. They left the merchant's shop with the money in hand and walked directly to the bank. The bank manager, a severe man named Mr. Thurston, who had sent all those threatening notices, looked surprised to see them. "Mr. Weston," he said coolly, "you are early. I was not expecting you until Friday." "I wanted to pay my debt before the deadline," Reese said, and counted out $300 onto the desk, keeping back only the small amount they needed for basic supplies. Mr. Thurston's expression shifted from cool to shocked. He counted the money twice, then looked up at Reese with something like respect. "Well, I confess I did not expect this. You have cleared your debt, Mr. Weston. Congratulations." "The ranch is mine free and clear," Reese confirmed. "Yes," Mr. Thurston said. He made some notations in his ledger. "Your father would be proud." They left the bank, and Reese felt lighter than he had in months. On the street, Kate grabbed his hand and squeezed tight, her face glowing with triumph. "We did it," she said. "You did it," Reese corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you." "We did it together," Kate said firmly. "Partners, remember?" Reese pulled her close, not caring who saw them on the main street of Wyatt. "Partners," he agreed. "And hopefully more than that." "Definitely more than that," Kate said, and kissed him right there in front of the bank and the general store and everyone. They bought supplies with the money they had left, flour and coffee and salt, and a few small luxuries they had been denying themselves. Mr. Patterson was delighted by their success and insisted on adding some extra sugar as a gift. As they loaded the wagon, the old shopkeeper said to Reese, "You found yourself a good woman there. Do not let her go." "I do not intend to," Reese said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The ride back to the ranch felt triumphant. They sang old songs, laughed at nothing, made plans for the future. The garden would be ready to harvest in a few weeks, and they could sell the vegetables in town. They would start rebuilding the herd slowly, buying a few head at a time as they could afford it. They would repair the barn, fix the fences, make the ranch productive again. It would take time, but they had time now. They had saved the ranch, and more importantly, they had found each other. That evening, Reese made dinner for once, wanting to give Kate a break. It was not fancy, just beans and bacon and biscuits. He burned only a little. But they ate it together at the kitchen table, and it tasted like victory. After dinner, they sat on the porch as the sun set. Reese had been thinking all day about how to do this properly, but in the end, he just spoke from his heart. "Kate," he said, taking her hand, "I know we have only known each other a few weeks. I know that by all reasonable standards this is too fast. but nothing about our situation has been reasonable. You saved my ranch and my life, but more than that, you gave me a reason to care about both again. I cannot imagine this place without you now. I cannot imagine my life without you. So I am asking, will you marry me? Will you make this our ranch, our home, our life together? Kate's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, she said. Yes, of course, yes. I love you, Reese. I did not expect to, did not think I could after Sam, but I do. I love you and I want to build a life with you here. Reese kissed her, a long, slow kiss that held promise and commitment and love. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were laughing, giddy with joy and relief and the sweet certainty of the future. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Wyatt. Mr. Patterson stood as a witness, along with the pastor's wife. Kate wore a simple blue dress, her best, and Reese wore his father's old suit, carefully brushed and mended. It was a small ceremony, but it felt enormous in its significance. When the pastor declared them husband and wife, and Reese kissed Kate in front of those few witnesses, he felt like the richest man in Montana territory. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The drought broke that fall with torrential rains that filled the creek to overflowing. They took it as a good sign, a blessing on their union. The garden produced abundantly, and Kate sold vegetables in Wyatt all through the autumn, bringing in steady money. They bought 3 young heifers and a bull to start rebuilding the herd. The first winter was harsh, as Montana winters always were, but they weathered it together. Reese taught Kate to shoot, to ride better, to understand cattle and horses. Kate taught Reese to cook properly, to mend his own clothes, to look at problems with creative solutions instead of grim resignation. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's moods. They learned how to work together, how to support each other, how to love each other through good days and hard days. In the spring of 1880, Kate told Reese she was expecting a baby. He was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure. The nearest doctor was in Wyatt, 15 miles away. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here. But Kate was calm about it, confident in her body and in the women in town who promised to help when the time came. Their son was born in late autumn, a healthy baby with a powerful set of lungs and his mother's green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Kate's first husband, because she wanted to honor the man who had brought her to Montana, even if he had not lived to see what she built there. Reese loved the name and the generosity of spirit it represented. Little Sam was the light of their lives, a squirming bundle of potential and promise. The ranch continued to grow slowly but steadily. By 1882, they had 20 head of cattle again and 4 horses. The barn had been repaired and expanded. The garden flourished every summer, and Kate had started keeping bees for honey, which sold well in town. They were not rich, not by any measure, but they were comfortable. They had food on the table, a roof over their heads and each other. It was more than enough. On their 5th anniversary, Reese surprised Kate by finishing the work on the old garden space, the one his mother had first planted. He had built a proper fence around it, protected from the cattle and deer. Inside, he had planted rose bushes, ordered special from a catalog. When Kate saw them, she cried happy tears and threw her arms around him. "It is beautiful," she said. "The most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "Not nearly as beautiful as you," Reese said, and meant it. Kate was 30 now, weathered by sun and wind and hard work, and she was the most beautiful woman in the world to him. Sam grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything on it. He followed Reese everywhere, learning to ride before he could barely walk, learning the names of all the cattle, learning the rhythms of ranch life. He was kind like his mother, determined like both his parents, and full of joy that reminded Reese daily how blessed his life had become. In 1884, Kate gave birth to their daughter, Rose, named for the garden Reese had built. She was tiny and perfect, with auburn hair like her mother and a temperament that swung between sweet and fierce. Sam adored his little sister, and the house rang with the sounds of childhood, laughter and tears and endless energy. Reese would sometimes stand on the porch in the evenings, watching Kate play with the children in the yard, and marvel at how close he had come to losing all of this. 6 years ago, he had been ready to give up, to let the bank take the ranch and walk away from everything. And then Kate had arrived, like an answer to a prayer he had been too angry and tired to pray. She had saved the ranch, yes, but more than that, she had saved him. She had shown him that giving up was not the only option, that hard work and partnership and love could overcome almost anything. She had given him hope when he had none, purpose when he was lost, love when he thought he would spend his life alone. The ranch that had been failing was now thriving. Not rich, not fancy, but solid and sustainable. They had nearly 40 head of cattle, a dozen chickens, the horses, the bees, the garden. They had a house full of love and laughter. They had each other and their children. They had a future. On a warm evening in the summer of 1885, 7 years after that desperate summer when everything had seemed lost, Reese and Kate sat on the porch after putting the children to bed. Sam was now 5, Rose just over a year old. Inside the house, both children slept peacefully, unaware of how hard their parents had fought to build this life for them. Kate leaned against Reese's shoulder, her hand in his. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land that had almost been taken from them and was now permanently theirs. The cattle grazed peacefully in the fields. The garden was lush with summer vegetables. The creek ran full and clear. Everything that had been broken had been mended. Everything that had been dying had been brought back to life. "Do you ever think about that day I arrived?" Kate asked quietly. "How different things were, all the time," Reese admitted. "I think about how close I came to turning you away, to saying no when you asked for work. I think about how my life would have gone if I had made that choice." "But you did not," Kate said. "You took a chance on me, on us." "Best decision I ever made," Reese said. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, soap and sunshine and home. "You gave me everything, Kate. The ranch, yes, but so much more than that. A family, a future, hope, love, everything that matters. We gave each other everything," Kate corrected gently. "That is what partnership means. That is what love means." They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars that had witnessed Reese's despair 7 years ago and now witnessed his contentment. The ranch was theirs, earned through hard work and sacrifice and love. Their children slept safely inside. Their future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. In the distance, a coyote howled and Scout answered with a soft whinny from the barn. The sounds of the Montana night, familiar and comforting. The sounds of home. Reese thought about his father, about the promise he had made on that deathbed to keep the ranch going. He had kept that promise, though not in the way he had expected. He had kept it with Kate's help, with her strength and determination and love. He liked to think his father would approve, would be proud not just of the ranch but of the family Reese had built here. "Thank you," he said quietly to Kate. "For what?" "For showing up that day. For staying. For fighting with me and for me. For loving me. For all of it." Kate tilted her face up to kiss him softly. "Thank you for letting me stay. For seeing me as a partner, not just a mouth to feed. For loving me back. For giving me a home and a family when I had neither." They stayed on the porch until the moon rose, talking and dreaming and planning. There was always more work to do, always challenges ahead. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. As they finally went inside, Reese took one last look at the land his father had claimed and he had nearly lost. The Weston Ranch, alive and thriving under the Montana stars. He thought about hope and failure and second chances. He thought about the woman who had arrived when hope was gone and brought it back with her determined spirit and generous heart. The ranch had been failing. Hope had been gone. But she had arrived, and together they had found both again. And in finding them, they had found each other and a love that would carry them through whatever the future held. Reese closed the door behind him and followed Kate up the stairs, ready to sleep beside the woman he loved in the house they had saved together, on the land they would work together, in the life they had built together from the ruins of failure and despair. It was everything he had ever wanted, everything he had thought he would never have, and it was real, solid theirs. The ranch was thriving. His family was happy and healthy. His heart was full. In the morning they would wake early as always. There would be chores and work and the endless demands of ranch life. There would be challenges, because there were always challenges. But they would face them together, as partners, as lovers, as the team they had become. The story that had started with a failing ranch and a desperate cowboy had become a story of love and redemption and second chances. It had become a story of partnership and hard work and refusing to give up even when giving up seemed like the only option. And as Reese lay down beside Kate that night, her hand finding his in the darkness, he knew with absolute certainty that this was not the ending of their story. It was just the beginning of the rest of their lives together, lives that would be full of love and work and family and all the beautiful ordinary moments that made a life worth living. The ranch was saved. Hope was restored. And in finding those things, Reese Weston and Kate Kimball Weston had found the greatest treasure of all. A love that could weather any storm, overcome any obstacle, and turn a failing ranch into a thriving home. As sleep claimed him, Reese's last thought was one of profound gratitude. For Kate, for their children, for the land beneath them and the roof over their heads. For second chances and hard work and the incredible gift of loving and being loved in return. The failing ranch had become a home. The lost hope had become a future. The lonely cowboy had become a husband and father. And the woman who had arrived with nothing but determination and a carpetbag full of china had become the center of his entire world. It was, Reese thought as he drifted off, a pretty good ending to what had started as a pretty desperate situation. But more than an ending, it was a beginning. The beginning of all the years they would spend together, building and loving and living on this land they had fought so hard to keep. And that was the best kind of story there was. The morning came soft and golden, light streaming through the bedroom windows. Kate woke first, as she often did, and lay for a moment watching Reese sleep. His face in repose showed the hard work of the years, lines around his eyes and mouth from sun and weather. But there was a peacefulness there too, a contentment that had been missing when they first met. She thought about that first day, how close she had come to not stopping at the ranch at all. She had almost kept driving, heading for the next town and whatever she might find there. But something had made her stop, some instinct or fate or divine guidance, and that choice had changed everything. Reese stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. He smiled, that slow smile that still made her heart skip. "Good morning, Mrs. Weston." "Good morning, Mr. Weston," she replied, as she did every morning. It was their small ritual, a reminder of the commitment they had made to each other and renewed every day. From down the hall came the sound of Sam waking up, his small feet hitting the floor. Then Rose's cry for her mother. The sounds of family, the sounds of home. They rose together to face the day, ready to work and love and live in this place they had built together from determination and hope and love. The ranch spread out around them, green and alive. Their children called for them, healthy and happy. The future waited, full of promise. And it all started because one desperate woman took a chance on a failing ranch and a desperate cowboy. And together, they found that nothing was impossible when you had love and hope and the willingness to fight for what mattered. The end.